Welcome to Audiobook 365 Stories.
The dining room had dark red wallpaper with strange shapes. Big lace curtains had yellow ribbons. A tired plant sat in a brown pot, and a big wooden table was on a thick carpet. On the wall was a mirror and a shelf with sad-looking pots and candle holders. The room was quiet, dark, and lifeless. Outside, a train rumbled far away, and a street lamp gave a faint light. A big picture hung on the wall. It showed 3 people on rocks during a sunset. In the middle was a small Madonna, wearing blue and gold. She looked sad and as if she was searching. Beside her was Saint John the Baptist, also looking confused. Behind them stood Saint and staring upwards. The picture felt lonely and full of loss. Suddenly, the little Madonna stepped out of the picture. She looked in the mirror and shook her head sadly. She searched the room but found nothing. She whispered, "Happy lady," at another picture and kept looking. She found the old lady's sewing basket on a table. This made her happy because it was usually locked away. She played with soft wool and shiny buttons. She thought about taking some small things back to her picture to hide under a tree. Then, a noise outside made her stop. She peeked through the curtain. Across the street, a light was on and a shadow moved behind the window. It looked nice, almost like her. She waited, feeling something special was going to happen. The front door across the street opened. A young man came out, looking scared. His hair was messy, and he held his coat tightly. He shouted, "Oh, will he never come?" Soon, a woman and a kind man with a beard arrived. They went into the house, leaving the young man alone. He looked lost, like her. The Madonna felt drawn to him. She usually avoided people, but he seemed different. She left the house, crossed the street, and stood quietly in front of him. At first, the man didn't notice her. She spoke softly, but he didn't hear. Then, she said in English, "What is it?" The man blinked and looked at her. "Who are you?" he asked. "Have you lost something?" she said. "Don't say that," he replied, shaking his head. I'm waiting." "You looked so sad." "I'm sad too," she said, holding out her empty arms. "See? I have nothing." The man frowned. "What are you looking for?" "I don't know," she said. "I thought you might help me find it. You seemed like you were looking too." "I'm not looking," he said. "I'm waiting. But waiting alone is hard. Will you stay with me?" "Yes," she said. "Tell me a story, like I'm a little kid," he asked. She smiled sadly. "I will try," she said. They sat together under a porch, safe from the rain. She began her story. "A long time ago, I was alive. I lived in a quiet place surrounded by high walls and mountains. There was snow outside, and it was cold and pure, just like the place inside. I was 16 years old and very unhappy. We couldn't smile, and there was always a skull on the table to remind us about death." The man asked, "What would you call a nice room?" She thought for a moment. "A room with little beds and wooden bars on the windows," she said. "We just made a room like that," he replied. "It has wallpaper with pigs and chickens on it." She continued, "There were iron bars on my window, but he broke them with his hands. He stood on his horse's saddle to free me. We rode into Florence as the sun rose. His arm held me close, and he spoke softly in my ear. The man smiled faintly. "Sounds like something from a poem," he said. She didn't understand and went on. He took me to a beautiful palace with gold, mosaics, and bright colors. The people there scared me. They laughed loudly and looked boldly at me. But he carried me into a grand hall, and everyone stood up, shouting and cheering. The little Madonna continued her story. There was a loud noise. Everyone cheered except one man. He was angry and threw a bag of gold at us. But the man holding me caught it and gave the gold to the servants. She paused, then said, "He gave me food and drink and sat with me." Later, the guests left and we were alone. She shivered. I tried to run away twice, but the servants brought me back. He tied me to his horse and punished me. He stopped loving me and was only happy when I was scared of him. I was always afraid. The man beside her whispered, "Afraid." I understand that now. The Madonna's face softened. But then I had a baby. He was small, pink, and smiled like sunshine. I loved him, and I was not afraid anymore. But the man killed my baby because I wasn't afraid of him anymore. Then he threw me out into the streets. I searched everywhere for my baby, knocking on doors and asking mothers. One day, she met a kind painter, Andrea del Sarto. He called her a real Madonna and painted her with a baby in her arms. For a while, I was happy in the painting, she said. But then, she added, the man who hurt me saw the painting. He was angry. He bought it and took it away. Later, he had the baby painted out of my arms. My hands were left empty. When I saw this, I died of sadness. They locked the painting in a dark cellar for years. After a long time, someone found it and placed it in the sad room where I now live. She looked at the man with hope. "Help me find him, my baby. Won't you help?" The man sighed. "I wish I could. It's not something I can do." Then, suddenly, he froze. "Did you hear that?" he asked. A faint cry came from the distance. The man jumped to his feet, unlocking a door. The Madonna's eyes lit up. "He's calling me," she cried. "No," said the man. "It's mine." The Madonna tried to follow, but the door closed between them. The job of selling Sabina Prestwich's things went to a company. Two workers, Mr. Ridgewell and Mr. Plum, sorted through her belongings. Most of it was not worth much, but they found an old painting. It came with a paper saying it had been hidden in Italy for years. The workers decided to ask an expert about its value. The painting was sent to an auction, and people from all over the world wanted it. There was a lot of excitement. Some thought it was painted by the famous artist Andrea del Sarto, while others did not agree. After much debate, the painting was bought by the government and placed in the National Gallery. People talked about it for days, but no one noticed the Madonna's empty arms. In the gallery, the Madonna hung on a wall. Many visitors stopped to look at her. Some felt sad and wondered why she looked so lonely. One day, a man and his daughter came to see the painting. The man froze when he saw it. He remembered the night many years ago when he had spoken to her. He whispered, "It's her. the poor little lady. His daughter was confused, but the man left to tell the gallery staff. He shared his story about the painting and the Madonna's plea to find her child. The gallery committee listened politely but decided nothing could be done. They believed the painting had always been the same, with no child in her arms. The man left the gallery, but he could not forget her sad, pleading eyes. The man told his wife about the painting and said, "There's nothing more I can do." But his wife couldn't stop thinking about it. She went to the old nursery, now a grown-up room. The toys and decorations were gone, but she still felt the spirit of a child there. The next day, she told her husband what he must do. He was scared, but he agreed because good husbands listen to their wives. Late at night, the man went to the gallery alone. He had a small light and a sponge with alcohol and turpentine. He cleaned the painting carefully. As he worked, it seemed the Madonna's eyes were watching him with trust. Slowly, the faint outline of a baby appeared in her arms. Its head rested against her, with a small white glow around it. The man cried out with joy. He remembered the painter's words and said, "I will put a child in your arms forever." When he looked at the Madonna's face, it had changed. Her sad eyes now looked at the baby, and her mouth had softened into a happy smile. Later, when others saw the painting, they didn't believe the man's story. They asked, "How can you explain the change?" He simply said, "Put a child in any woman's